Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the whole wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
That's Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Tuesday, 10:30 on the Eastern Seaboard, coming to you live, rumble.com/amradpod. Just had the Kyle Seraphin Show raid into the program. Welcome you all. Make sure that you do smash the thumbs up. Follow the channel, subscribe if you want. Definitely subscribe. Even if you're watching, give us a subscribe on iTunes or Spotify or iHeart so we can continue to grow on the audio format of the podcast. We're reaching like over 1,000 people an episode there. So that's really looking good. Great to have everyone along with us for today. Today, we're going to do a deep history dive, at least for a little while, because Garrett and I have continued to reference a old story about Andrew Jackson saying, let him enforce it. A conversation about having an energetic president who's basically telling the Supreme Court, well, you and what army is going to do whatever you tell me to do, and maybe drawing some lessons from that and how the new second Trump administration can conduct itself in the face of a lot of resistance. And we're going to get to some of that. The resistance coming from some activist judges, some federal unions, some current federal and actually former federal workers, as well as people who purport to be from our tribe, the Christians. That's what their moniker they're going with. I'll leave that up to the GOB to infer whether or not they're actually followers of the Bible. And then also we want to get into some more DOGE battles that have been going on, because they are coming fast and furious. And with a DEI victory, is it not? We'll give our thoughts on that. So a lot to get to today. Great to have you with us. It was a busy weekend here in Daytona. The Daytona 500 went for like 11 hours because of weather delays and lots of wrecks. But I'm grateful now that there's way less traffic in my hometown and the weather's looking good. Unlike Wisconsin, which is, I don't know, Nineveh. But we're going to get the update from GOB Actual, my co-host, Garrett O'Boyle, who makes his triumphant return to the podcast after surviving from the, what'd you get, the flu, the bird flu, the swine flu, or the Omicron variant?
I don't know. I had I still got a little bit lingering here, but like a upper respiratory cough. People could probably tell a little bit last week. And then I had like a 24-hour flu. And so I don't know if that was all the same man-made, released in a China lab virus or what it was, but definitely on the up and up now.
It's unprecedented. No one ever in recorded history has ever gotten sick in the month of February. It's unheard of. We should probably ask Debbie Birx what she thinks.
We should all be wearing a mask, Steve.
I mean, wear a plastic bag over your head and the virus will never get you. All right. I teased it, and I did my own homework on this because I keep at least referring to this Andrew Jackson story. And I wanted to find out more about where that came from. I just kind of knew it in the back of my head. I don't know, just being a person who appreciates American history, but I didn't know the genesis of this. Then the theory being that the Supreme Court said something and Andrew Jackson was like, nah, we're not going to do that. Let you enforce it. So I did a little bit of homework, Garrett. I don't know if you're familiar with this case, but I think that the parties here, at least one of them, might be a suspendable. So we'll leave it up to you and maybe the audience to bring it to us. This is the story that I found, and I have to apologize that it's difficult to read for those watching. It's Worcester versus Georgia. It was a Supreme Court case, and I got it from the Georgia Encyclopedia, or the New Georgia Encyclopedia, which is probably sympathetic to salon.com and the Southern Poverty Law Center in its political leanings. But I did my best to try to glean out of there the actual facts of this case, Garrett. So let's work our way through it a little bit. I'll throw it off the screen because it's kind of boring to look at. In the 1820s, 1830s, Georgia, the state of Georgia, was doing a campaign to remove the Cherokee Nation.
Uh-oh.
1827, the Cherokees established their own constitutional government in the state of Georgia. They declared that they were a sovereign nation and that they could not be removed by any of the authorities without their consent. The Georgia legislature then responded to that move, and they basically said, "We have jurisdiction over you." And any Cherokees living in the state's boundaries were residents of the state or could be basically have their land seized. Georgia annexed their land. Then, at a federal level, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, which we all know ultimately ends with the Trail of Tears. We were all taught that in school, right? So that gave the president at the time, who was Andrew Jackson, the authority to negotiate removal treaties. He wasn't just sending in the troops; they were compulsory and they were coerced treaties, but on paper they were actually treaties. So,
See what the victor does, Steve.
write the history, don't they, man? Well, unless you're from the New Georgia Encyclopedia, they write exactly the opposite. Right. In Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, this is a separate case. The Supreme Court held that it did not have the jurisdiction to strike down Georgia's laws. So Georgia passed a law saying, we basically annex the entire Cherokee reservation, or it wasn't a reservation, your land. And the Cherokees sued. They went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, states' rights. They can do whatever they want, right?
It's our land now.
So that's when we find our character here, who is up for nomination as a suspendable. His name is Samuel Worcester. He's a native of Vermont, and he was a minister and a missionary to the Cherokee Nation. The Georgia government enacted a law because he was down sharing the gospel, sharing the word with the Cherokees in Georgia. And the Georgia government didn't like it. So they enacted a law that prohibited white persons from residing in the Cherokee Nation without their permission.
Wow.
So Worcester decided to challenge the law, and he refused to leave the state of Georgia.
Good for him.
Authorities arrested him, but then his defense said that he was actually the postmaster. So he was there under the color of law from the federal government. So Georgia went back to the feds and was like, take away his postmaster job so that he's now in violation of our state law. And the feds did it. Okay.
Of course they did.
So the Georgia governor persuaded the U.S. to relieve Worcester of his postmaster duties and then ordered him to leave a second time. And the Georgia Guard arrested him when he failed to comply that second time. He posted bond and he left temporarily to go to Tennessee, where there was also Cherokee Nation, because Tennessee and Georgia are adjoining states. But then his daughter got sick and she was living in Georgia. So he came home to care for his ill daughter. She actually winds up dying. The Georgia Guard arrested him the third time, and he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 4 years in prison and hard labor.
Wow.
All right. So before we get up to where this has this fallen to let him enforce it, the Jackson quote. Your thoughts? Is Samuel Worcester kind of a suspendable? Is he kind of a bro?
Definitely. He 100% is. I mean, think of this. He's going in. Oh no, I'm a postmaster. I'm not a missionary. I'm a postmaster. This is what missionaries are doing today still in hostile countries. If you go to China as a missionary, you're not going as a missionary. You're going as something else, an English teacher or who knows what. And not just China. There's plenty of other countries that this is the case. And people are doing it anyways. But, oh, Steve, it's against the law. It's against their law. Well, yeah, as we've covered time and time again here, you have a duty and a moral obligation to resist tyrannical, unjust, unrighteous, ungodly law. And look at this. The Supreme Court case, 1832, I think you said,
Yep.
So even in America, the government has hated the First Amendment for a long time, and they have enacted lawfare for a long time. This is just a great historical example of this. I love it. This is a fantastic dive. This is American radicals roots right here. This is stuff we used to get into a lot more frequently, and I'm glad that you dug this up because we have to understand history so we can do it better. And I think we fail by and large, time and time again, at failing to. I've never heard this story before, so I'm as guilty as anybody here to not know about this. And look at the levels that were involved. The post office is involved. The federal government is involved. The judiciary is involved, and they're all going against the guy who's going against the grain. He's not complying with what they want. 100% suspendable.
And we'll eventually see that the Supreme Court and the President of the United States get involved because Mr. Worcester, Samuel Worcester, he contests his arrest. He contests the Georgia law, the annexation, and the law that says that white people can't be on the Indian
These are
reservations.
bad laws. Think of just from an American perspective, the American government in the alleged land of the free. This is why we say that's the alleged land of the free. Because is that free? You're going to pass a law because one white dude is spreading the gospel and you don't like that? I mean, that's
At least we can say this has been going on for 200 years. So we're not totally new and unprecedented in this one. So Samuel Worcester eventually goes to the Supreme Court, Worcester versus Georgia. And the Supreme Court struck down Georgia's extension laws, saying that they couldn't just annex territory, saying that they couldn't just forbid the white man from going on to the Indian land, right? Justice John Marshall declared that the Cherokees possessed the right to live free from the state's trespasses.
Ooh, okay.
And then Georgia ignored the Supreme Court and
Wow.
refused to release Samuel Worcester and continued to press the federal government to remove all the Cherokees from the state of Georgia. President Jackson did not enforce the Supreme Court decision against the state and instead called on the Cherokees to relocate or fall under Georgia jurisdiction. The President Jackson is widely quoted as saying, quote, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it," unquote. That is not what he said. It's actually was, quote, "The decision of the Supreme Court has fell stillborn, and they find that it cannot coerce Georgia to yield to its mandate." I don't know, it's 1830s language, a little bit more sophisticated than we get today, but basically saying the same thing. I'm not going to intervene because I want the policy outcome going the other way,
Right.
and I'm not going to adhere to John Marshall, the Supreme Court. They don't really have an army. They are
Yeah.
a co-equal branch, but not really, right?
This is not at all different from what we see today. It's not even any different than what we saw in just the last handful of years. Oh, well, what Congress is going to send a strongly worded letter. The Supreme Court's going to rule. Take the Dobbs decision. They're going to rule the way they're going to rule. And then what's going to happen? Biden's not going to really force it. The military is going to say, "Oh, we'll send you to other states if you're a service member to get an abortion if you want one because we don't really care what they say."
So the way this story actually wraps up is that there's a dissident faction of the Cherokees that kind of breaks away, and they sign the treaty. And then Andrew Jackson says, "Well, the Cherokees agreed," and they boot them out of the state and they march them the Trail of Tears out to Oklahoma. What happens to our hero or suspendable of the story, Samuel Worcester? A new governor came into Georgia. His name was Wilson Lumpkin. He persuaded the legislature to repeal the law after they'd already evacuated all of the Cherokees.
Yeah, we got what we wanted,
Yep.
so fine.
And then the law they had used to convict him, they offered Worcester a pardon and pressured him because he still wanted to stay in jail to make a point.
Mm.
He eventually, though, acquiesced to the pressure, took the pardon, and then went to Oklahoma to continue his missionary work.
I mean,
So
yeah.
that's what he was there for. The people were not there. He was going to go where the food was, right?
Yeah, I give him credit even for that because he obviously was geared towards taking a stand and saying, "Fine, I'll just rot away in this prison," and then probably just came to a spiritual realization. You know, I'm sure he was praying, reading his Bible while he was in prison, and realized, what's my main objective? What's my main mission? To fight the government or to witness to the Cherokees? And so he he continued on with that. Man, this is good stuff, Steve. I want to just sit here and listen myself. So
Well,
good
I'm going to
luck
need
with
some
me
more
as a coach.
participation because we're going to have to apply the lessons from this one. I mean, the let him enforce it aspect to it, uh, and push away the morality of what the federal government was going there for, and or maybe even imbibe it and consider what's going on today. Because I think today's 21st century American kind of sees what went on in the 1800s as being maybe cruel, but it's also just the nature of history, right? That conquest does happen. That's happened throughout the entire existence of the species, and we just are this unique time where we look back and say, "Well, we're not going to do it entirely. We're going to do it softly." And now we've reaped the whirlwinds because I could tell you from 7 years on an Indian reservation that it would have been better if we had just gone with the full-on conquest as opposed to allowing 200 years to elapse for people living in abject poverty, completely dependent on their daddy federal government to give them welfare. But for our purposes today, the let him enforce it. Let's talk about some of the recent goings on and the continued resistance. Some activist judges are starting to pipe in. We've seen a couple examples in the most recent one. Reporting NBC News, a federal judge temporarily blocks the Trump executive order restricting trans care, as NBC calls it, for use. So meatball surgery for little boys is what this federal judge says that he wants to continue. He blocked the executive order that that the president issued, which was called "Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation." And the executive order, for purposes of background, stated that heads of all departments and agencies had to provide research or education grants to medical institutions had to take appropriate steps to ensure that the institutions receiving the federal money weren't doing the meatball surgery. That was the carrot and the stick that they were going to use to enforce this. So there was a lawsuit already started by the activist groups. They venue shopped. They found an activist judge. The federal judge temporarily blocked Trump's executive order, and the attorney who comes from the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, their LGBTQ and HIV project. Why
Oh,
are those
goodness.
together? Why
Yeah.
this seems like one's a way of life, the other one is it's maybe a downstream consequence of that.
Maybe
But
they should read Romans 1, Steve. I think, depending on your translation, it says something to the effect of the due penalty for their error when it's speaking of the abominable sin of homosexuality. But I digress.
so this attorney, whose name is Joshua Block, said that the executive order had sown fear among transgender youth and confusion among their providers. The ACLU filed a lawsuit last week on behalf of 2 transgender young adults who are 18 and 5 families of minors who are allowing their children to be butchered. The suit argued that the order, along with another executive order that Trump signed declaring that federal government will only recognize 2 unchangeable sexes, discriminated against trans people because it allows the same treatments for other health conditions for people under 19 who are not transgender.
Nobody's transgender. Sorry,
Hmm.
that's a fake thing.
So this is, I think, a this is an instance where I would like to see let him enforce it.
Yeah. This is
Send your army, judge.
Yeah, please, judge, come and impede what the vast majority of Americans have voted for, which we're only going to continue to see actions by judges like this, where they are directly trying to impede what the vast majority of people want. This is what we voted for. We had an idea. Maybe some people knew. I actually am surprised still at the veracity of how rapidly the new administration is moving. And it actually makes me even more happy for what the people voted for, because we have lived through an insane period of time, especially I would say the last, let's see, it's 2025, 20, yeah, 5 6 years. It all goes back to COVID, as you know, Steve, and really since then it has been, I think, undoubtedly the most interesting of times in my life. And then when you just extend that out and look at it globally and nationally, I think that's true. And I think a lot of people realize that and they want some sort of return to normalcy. So come on, judge, come and bring your army with you and try to enforce it. And hopefully, similarly, like in the 1830s, the president and the administration says, okay, thanks for your ruling. We're going to carry on with our executive orders and what the people actually want.
Some of the groups that are bringing these suits, I think, are also worth looking into. And again, let them enforce it, or let whatever sorts of resources or material that they have to be the resistance here. Let's put them for a decision for their chips on that one. And that would be these federal unions that are coming in, which I've always had a problem with, because when a federal union sits at the bargaining table with the government actor, there's nobody actually representing the people, because the politician who's sitting at the table is theoretically representing us. But if the unions donate to his campaign, they're just all on the same team, aren't they? So federal unions are also part of the resistance, reporting from the Washington Post. Because democracy dies in darkness, these unions are taking the lead in the resistance to Trump's presidential power grab.
Resist we much.
Well, the level of hysteria from WAPO is palpable, as they say that President Donald Trump overwhelmed federal workers with shock and fear immediately upon taking office. Why would you be shocked and
Yeah.
fearful?
You know,
They-
Steve, I'm technically a federal worker. I have no fear. If anything, I have far less fear today than I did on November 3rd or 4th.
Are you not doing perimeter checks around 0600 at your house anymore?
No longer.
So Trump's executive order he issued that agencies could not hire more than one employee unless they'd fired four others. And the Washington Post described that over time, in theory, that could lead to unimaginable severe workforce reduction.
Yeah, that's
in
a
mo-
good thing. That's what we want, WAPO.
they are able to decide and came to the conclusion that 1 minus 4 equals -3. So props. There was no math is racist in that part of their analysis. So federal union membership is now jumping because of President Donald Trump. The American Federation of Government Employees Legislative Conference last week, they didn't focus on the need for greater pay and benefits. That's what every union always does all the time, forever. But instead, they wanted to push back on the Trump power push. And that was their central focus. Donald Trump, however, has said that he rests his power on Article 2 of that pesky Constitution.
Oh, no. Don't
And
let the
it says
Constitution
in
get
the
the way.
first sentence, the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America, which I think he's on pretty firm ground on that one.
Yes.
If you're the CEO of the executive branch, you kind of get to run the executive branch, right?
Yep. This is, again, it goes back to COVID. This was one of the main arguments that we would hear after the vaccine mandate, even though a court eventually ruled that it exceeded the president's authority, which anybody with half a brain, not even a legal brain, would know that forcing you essentially to put something into your body that you don't want exceeds any government in history's power. Doesn't stop them to try to do it, but they would say, "Oh, Article 2, he's the president." Well, this is different in that he's not trying to force you to put something into your body. This is him managing the workforce as he should, like a CEO, as you referenced. And when you got $35 trillion roughly of debt, and it's just continuing to tick up, what the best way to reduce some of that expense, which again is what the people want, this is what we voted for, it's reducing the workforce. So I don't feel bad for these people. We've talked about it plenty of times here. Federal government, federal workforce, federal employees are the worst aspect of that oftentimes, because they get into this just whimsical, lackadaisical, good enough for government work type of mentality. And so yeah, fine. We're gonna start cutting you 4 for 1.
I mean, it's in line with the CEO sort of analogy. If this was a giant company, the American people are the shareholders, and theoretically, we can exert enough force through this thing called an election to select our CEO. And then the CEO is supposed to be the steward at the helm at that point. He's supposed to be driving the mission forward as he's using his best judgment to do. If he doesn't do a good job, we fire him, right? And if there is a actual budget set place by the chief financial officer or the board of directors, and in this case, it would be a negotiation between the executive branch and the legislative branch about how they're going to fund the government. To me, it's always been a head scratcher that the power of the purse is with the legislative branch, and they say that we want to get this mission done. And we're going to give you, I mean, we want to build this structure for $1 million. That's your budget, President. Go and execute, go get it done. And the CEO of the company goes, okay, I'm going to need this amount of people to do it. And I'm going to do it in this amount of time. And I'm under budget. If the president comes in and says, oh, I built the building for $900,000, I saved $100,000, that's a problem now. We needed you to spend that extra 100,000. And we, the shareholders, the voters, are not in the process here. And we're saying, well, no, we want the guy to come in under time and under budget, using the limited amount of people as possible to actually build the structure. Why is that a problem? But apparently when it comes to government, it is. You have to hire the most amount of people because it's a jobs program, and who cares? We can just print more money and make sure that we are pulling people from multiple different districts, so that multiple different congressional representatives can go home and say, look at all the bacon I brought home.
Mm-hmm. And only in government, Steve, is it ever the inverse of common sense? Because take Target or Bud Light, or who are some of your other woke companies that took a massive hit? They took a massive hit and were like, ooh, we need to really reevaluate how we're doing things. Because if you're at the end of the year, and it's been going on for decades now in this country from the government side, but if you're a business at the end of the year, if you're consistently in the red, your business is not going to last. So I don't see how so many can say, oh yeah, well, that's different with government. No, it's not. If you want a nation like ours to remain powerful, especially on the global stage, which you should, because we're the enemy of a lot of people because of the strength that we have relished in for many decades as well, then you need to manage your books. You need to keep that management in tip-top shape, or you're going to become that third world nation eventually.
Well, I think one of the people that was probably, of the four you eliminate in order to add one, was this DOJ worker. Again, the resistance continues until morale improves, and I don't think it's going to be improving very quickly, because they seem to be taking the 20 side of every 80-20 issue. But founder of a pro-diversity, equity, inclusion group at the Department of Justice has a new gig undermining Trump from the outside,
Okay.
from the Daily Caller.
Good luck with that.
Stacey Young, who's the founder of the Department of Justice Gender Equality Network, DOJ Gen, launched a group called Justice Connection to offer legal support for employees impacted by efforts to cut the workforce. Young, who worked for the DOJ for 18 years, noted that a growing list of senior career officials in the criminal, national security, civil rights, civil, environment, and natural resources divisions in the Executive Office for Immigration Review and in the FBI. Wow, it's a lot of people. They've been terminated over the past few weeks, which they just have a job that isn't worth doing, that we don't really see a particular value for. But she doesn't come to that conclusion because she's a government worker. Stacey Young sees herself as being entitled to have a job because she's always had a job, and the antiquity of error is in itself a justification for its perpetuity. On her way out, Young shut down DOJ Gen, a group that she founded in 2016. I wonder why. She was there for 18 years, but just 8 years ago, she came to the conclusion that she needed to do a DEI thing. Could it have been because we had a President Trump running and eventually getting elected for the first time? So this group that Stacey Young formed over the last 8 years, because they were worried about diversity, equity, and inclusion, their initiatives were to push for coverage of abortion in healthcare plans for government workers, and to prioritize diversity in leadership, and opposed an executive order in 2020 that restricted diversity training to federal agents. They said, no, having 2 DEI web trainings to FBI personnel is not enough. We got to get to 3. Her new group that she's now formed is called is sponsored by the Government Accountability Project.
What?
And that's a George Soros cutout. So it's former workers, it's big slush funds and globalists, it's judges who are activists in nature, it's unions. I just am coming back to, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's see you enforce it.
We need less Stacey's in government. So I'm glad she's gone. Good luck with your pet project over there and your Soros money, but we're all better off without somebody like her in government. And I think of just what you touched on from that article, nearly everything you said. I try not to deal in absolute, Steve, but sometimes, and this is one where I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure it was everything he said is not part of proper government function. I don't care about your DEI stuff, and no FBI agent should. Uh, Pretty much nobody in government should, because what is your mission? Take the postmaster, even the postmaster from the 1830s. What's a post office worker's job? Is to get your mail where it's supposed to go. Speaking of which, I've got a package that I've been waiting for. It was it was in a nearby suburb recently, like over the weekend, and now it's in North Dakota. So please, USPS, do less DEI and focus on getting the mail where it's supposed to go. Uh, Furthermore, DOJ, what does that have to do with your mission? Because what is the Department of Justice's mission when you take the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, all the Civil Rights Division, and all these different things? It's to pursue justice through our constitutional system. We've got the baseline because we have a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights. We've built it over a couple hundred years with case law and different laws. That's your mission. What does that have to do with any of the DEI crap? I'm grateful overall is what I'm trying to say is I'm grateful that someone like Stacey Young is not in government and she's going to try to subvert from the outside. Okay, good luck with that. But the people are by and large waking up and realizing that the ship has jumped the shark long ago, and they're done. They're done with it. And they want less of you, they want less employees, they want less expenditures, they want less waste, they want less money going overseas. Even with what DOGE has been uncovering, like condoms going to Gaza for $50 million. That aside, which of course is a fraud, waste, and abuse. But they don't even want, and I'm with them. We don't even want money going to fund whatever color revolution in Ukraine in 2014 or wherever, or Ukraine right now. And so it's good to see that the majority of people are like, whatever, bye, good luck with your George Soros pet project.
Well, Stacey Young is out of the government. Let's talk about somebody who's in the government and in a position now, thanks to our ex-girlfriend continuing to elevate her,
Hmm.
a position of authority, and that is Sarah Linden.
Oh goodness.
Let me just put this picture up there just to get you fired up, Garrett. And
Yeah,
and
it's
by the way,
quite
the next
pleasant.
one's going to get you even more fired up. For those listening, Sarah Linden was a part of the Neal Team 6, the Washington field office, who stood out during the Black Lives Matter protests/riots that were occurring in the summer of love 2020. And multiple FBI agents stood outside in full cosplay, kitted up, and they saw fit to take a knee because that's tactical. And we have now called them the Neal Team 6. But after you see Sarah Linden, I'm tempted to make it the Meal Team 6.
Mm-hmm.
She's now been promoted. Seems that she's in charge of counterintelligence now, Russian counterintelligence or something. This is another one who is probably going to have to be reassessed her value. Does she do a job that's worth doing? If it's worth doing, is she equipped and capable of doing it? If she has the lack of common sense or lacks of discretion as it comes to should you take a knee in front of a mob that has proven itself to be violent, or are you just a political actor? But this is continuing to go on from the inside, so it's not enough to just fight it out in the courts, to fight it out with the unions, fight out with the former employees. There's going to be a battle with the employees that are still there, and they're just going to have to cancel their security clearances or just fix the glitch Office Space style and stop direct deposit.
Yeah, they're going to have to. So the questions you listed off about her and her position and her role and her capability, no, 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 are the answers. And then I think the final one is yes, because you said, or is she just a political actor? And I think based on her own actions, we can safely presume that the answer to that question is yes, because she's taking a knee with solidarity with BLM, a rogue activist group who is burning down cities and engaging in violence. And in this case, if you want to be charitable to the FBI agents who took a knee like she did, you could say, well, they were afraid. They were scared because the crowd was big.
Wait, I got to push pause. What's the second word of the motto?
Bravery? No, that's allegedly bravery. So, okay, think actually this is a good turn. Take the whole model: fidelity, bravery, and integrity. If you exemplified fidelity, you would have all stood together. You would have stood, you wouldn't have kneeled, you would have stood together. Because if you look, if people go and pull up all the pictures from that day, you will see, and I think it was a female too, a female African American agent not taking the knee. But then you get the Sarah Linden type, so white Karen wearing her COVID mask, who is, because she's afraid. So one, if you exemplified fidelity, none of you would have taken a knee because you would have trusted in your brothers and sisters in arms, or however you want to term it, and your colleagues. You know that they have the same training at a minimum as you had. So you know that they all have a gun. You know that they all have defensive tactics training. You know that they all have legal training on what they can and can't do. Because then if you want to get a little less charitable, you can say, huh, that could be a Hatch Act violation because you're on duty, you're an FBI agent, which means you're further restricted, and now you're taking a knee with an overtly political group. And now you're doing it for the whole world to see. So the bravery thing. Okay, so you're scared. Because I heard when I was still in the FBI that some of them were afraid. Okay, and then integrity, which is really the capstone of it. And what it all boils down to. If if you were lacking in bravery, if you were lacking in fidelity, but you still had your integrity, you wouldn't have done it. But they all did it. I say all, not all, but the vast majority of them did. And then they were rewarded for it by the FBI AA, which we talked about unions a little bit ago. The FBI doesn't have a union, but they do have the Agents Association that FBI agents can pay $5. I think it's $5, $10 a month. So it's like $5 dues every paycheck, and you can get legal representation allegedly through them, unless it's for COVID, because we tried that and it didn't work. But you pay your dues, and they operate in a similar fashion. But then, if you go back to Sarah Linden again, if you just look at the picture, I would really like to see her last PT test, what the score was, how many she has done since, or how many she has skipped since then, and what the rationale is for her skipping them. Because I guarantee that she cannot pass the fitness test. Guarantee she cannot pass it. And then I would also like to see her qualifications, because FBI agents are supposed to qualify a minimum of 4 times a year, supposed to do it every quarter. So I'd like to see what her capabilities are like there. But she is deemed fit to now lead the counterintelligence division. I mean, Steve, I could probably go on for the rest of the show and then some about the problems with a promotion like this. And look, they're doing it right in your face. They know Kash Patel is coming. Donald Trump is already there. Pam Bondi is already there. And oh, Sarah Linden, you're on deck. You're next up. You got to be effing kidding me.
I just have a couple of points about this entire ordeal, and then we can go off of it because it's 5 years old at this point. But all right, for those who are only listening, Sarah Linden is taking a knee in this photo that I've thrown up here. And to me, it's not a very good tactical position to be at a knee. And it's also really not a good idea for your back foot, if you're in a kneeling position, to be the top of your foot down as opposed to your toe down. So you can't even get up fast. And she's not of a physical specimen that she could be able to get up fast anyway. But that's just somebody who has no awareness of what's always a good decision. And then also just in general, the FBI saw fit, the FBI, who doesn't train you on crowd control,
No.
or riot tactics. I mean, it's law enforcement cosplay for the most part. The cosplay of, we're going to send you out there in the gear and equipment that you never use and never put on to go out as a show of force, and thinking, well, what if we get put for a decision for our ships here, and we're going to have people who are ill-equipped, so ill-equipped that they take a knee using the back foot that is in a compromised position. They're really lucky that something didn't actually happen there.
Right.
But it's just always back to the fact that the people making decisions, who will now be Sarah Linden, are more worried about optics than actually being effective, or reviewing what the actual mission set is. And that's supposed to be investigating violations of federal crime, rather than just parading around Washington, D.C. in, it was a summer day. I mean, if this had been going on in February, I don't think that they would have deployed them out there.
Right. I think you're right. Oh, it's winter. Oh, we can't go out. It's too
There's a
cold.
slight dusting out there. We're gonna have to
Yeah.
cancel it. All right, Garrett. I want to contrast our Samuel Worcester story with this next one because I think the stories have the possibility. And if you're not actually going to do any analysis or deep level thinking, you could think, I could see some overlap there. But there's quite a big contradiction. And this is a report from Newsweek about thousands, 11,000 actually, Christians who signed a petition against the ICE raids that are happening with mass deportation efforts
Dude.
here as this nationwide effort is going on.
Oh man.
Over 11,000 people signed a petition by a Christian group called Faithful America, opposing immigration and customs enforcement from operating inside of churches. They basically want to say that we are back in the days of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and you can come Esmeralda style running in and say, sanctuary, sanctuary, and the law enforcement apparatus can't come in and get you because of their First Amendment right to a religion. Okay. I think that it's worth digging into who is Faithful America. We knew a little bit about Samuel Worcester. We had to learn more about him. So I wanted to learn more about Faithful America.
Oh, dude. Right off the bat. Okay. Right there on the if you know, you know. It says, for those just listening, right off the bat of what Steve pulled up here, it says, stand with Bishop, and I don't know how to say her name. It's Bud or Buddy or Bude. I don't know. Stand with Bishop Bude in defending our neighbors. So right off the bat, you know where we're headed.
So, Garrett, why don't you tell if remind the audience who is
Okay.
Bishop Butt Buddy?
If you aren't aware, or if you maybe if you are and you just don't know her name, Marianne Buddy or Bude or whatever. I should probably know how to say her name. I've written about her a little bit in a Substack. She was the one who gave the, I don't know what the ceremony was called or whatever. She's I want to say Anglican. No. She's I forget what her denomination is, but she shortly after
Universalist or something.
oh god,
Probably a Methodist.
yeah, could easily be a Methodist for sure. She's the one who gave the invocation shortly after President Trump was sworn in. He was there, JD Vance was there, a bunch of people were there, and she basically just exercised her political views. And then you find out days later that she also was standing in solidarity with BLM and marching in the streets with them a couple years ago while she was wearing her mask. So she's been very anti-Trump to start. But the worst piece of it is that she invokes God and she invokes Christ when the reality of the matter is that she worships a false God. I mean, that's plain and simple is what's going on here.
My eyes, and again, those listening, you wouldn't see it in the top right of this website for Faithful America. They reference Christian nationalism, which we've talked about before, the canard that is. And you get the Public Religion Research Institute that says Christian nationalism overlaps with voting for Republicans, basically. And it's like 30 to 40% of America or adherents to it, regardless of your race. It's still refracted through white supremacy. So that makes you a racially motivated violent extremist, i.e. domestic terrorist. But I instead clicked on the About Us, which I will now share with you, Garrett. About Us. You see, they're out there with the kente cloths and the megaphones. And I pulled out a couple of excerpts from from this organization that's Faithful America. It says, we're fighting for social, economic, and racial justice, standing with Black Lives Matter movement and upholding the gospel's value of love, equality, and dignity. Together, we're helping make a difference for immigrants, refugees, the climate, the LGBTQ community, and more. Are they bringing anybody to Jesus? I don't know.
Doesn't sound like it.
Bullet points of some of their accomplishments. They campaigned against Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Number one, they built a 15-foot inflatable golden calf.
What?
They prevented pro-violence, anti-democracy, toxic Christian nationalist events from finding a new venue after they had already had their first event. They received recognition for our resources against white Christian nationalism from the Southern Poverty Law Center, helped Catholic students win justice for their fired gay principal. They defeated a fracking pipeline, and they helped to pass Obamacare. Now, Garrett, the comparison between Faithful America and Samuel Worcester, because you could say that he was sympathizing with the Cherokee Nation, and they are sympathizing with illegal aliens. I think that that's not completely accurate. I think the one's political, one's faith driven. And I don't even need to make that case. I just need to see the end result. Because as I told you, Samuel Worcester moved to Oklahoma to continue his mission work. Do you think that they're going to get on the planes with the Tren de Aragua down to Gitmo or wherever we send them to continue to fight for their justice or equality? Or is this just cloaking yourself in trying to use people who are of legitimate faith to try to use that against them and say, don't you want to be a good Christian? You know, good Christians are really all in favor of Obamacare. Your thoughts, sir?
This is a heresy. This is heretical, plain and simple. This is apostasy. And what is stunning to me, and maybe a little bit is because it's fresh in my mind from my last handful of Substacks I've been putting out, where I touch on a little bit of this. I touched on Marianne Bude myself in one of my recent ones, and some others who are just as apostate. And I didn't even get much into the nitty gritty of some of this movement. I looked at some of the easy things you can pick out from a biblical perspective, like LGBTQ agenda, for instance, or things along those lines. But this is a broader problem with the American church. And it's not just, she's Episcopalian. It's not just some of these denominations that have really, really turned away from the faith. It's far and wide. Take your mega churches. There's a lot of them, which I touched on some of them as well in some of these recent posts, but it is an insidious deception within the church to twist God's word to try to get you to fall for this. It's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer calls cheap grace versus costly grace. And it's this, love. We just have to love one another and then everything's going to be fine because Jesus is love. The Bible says so. Yeah, it does say that. The Bible does say that. And we are to love even our enemies. We are to love, by the way. And we should pray for them just as we should pray for our government and each other. But that doesn't mean that you sacrifice the truth for love, because in reality, if you sacrifice the truth, you are now becoming anti-love, because the truth should be paramount to people who claim they love one another. And is it truthful to let Marianne Buddy even be a pastor? No, it's not, because the Bible is very clear on that. So she already is in a position that I call her a non-bishop, because she's not. Biblically speaking, she is not a bishop. I don't care what the Episcopalian Church says. They are wrong. And this isn't, oh, Garrett, what do you mean they're wrong? Go read your Bible. The Bible is very clear on this, just as it is clear on most issues in life, and even ones that may not be written clearly, like wear your mask because you love one another. If you will discern through God's word and the Holy Spirit, prayer and reading his word, you will be able to discern the apostasy of a lot of these churches or a lot of these people who lean onto Christ to spew what is really satanic lies. And that's what's happening here is deep-seated satanic lies.
So, in keeping with the theme of the day, like let him enforce it. I think the Trump administration is trying to go about doing it through the system, and then it'll ultimately come down to if the system is going to reject all their efforts in good faith, and they're just going to have to say, "Well, all right, I'm going to come enforce it." So, let's cover a couple of the times that they're trying to actually work effectively through the system to say, "See, you made us fight it out, and we won the fight." And one of them here was from the Blaze that they got a win in court actually. And I love how they just keep showing pictures of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Like they weren't friends like 6 months ago, but it's
I
still
know,
really
right?
funny.
Yeah.
All right. So the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, scored legal win, maintaining access to data from 3 federal agencies. They're fighting back against this outside entity, which basically has been empowered by the president to go and do an audit of what's going on here. I think, again, this is what people voted for, but they're getting a ton of resistance from the inside. So DOGE secured a legal victory when a federal judge ruled that the agency can access data from departments of labor, Health and Human Services, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's Liz Warren's little pet project. It's actually the same judge who said that they had to restore CDC website pages that said that people could do meatball surgery and that was effective. So maybe they've got this judge kind of saying, I don't want to get John marshaled and say, let them enforce it. So the complaint argued that DOGE, which was established by executive order, is not a legitimate federal agency since it is not formed by Congress and thus should not be allowed to access sensitive information. However, the district court judge, whose name is John Bates, disagreed. He found that the plaintiffs failed to show a substantial likelihood that DOGE is not a government agency since the president said, yeah, this is my team here on the outside. Now, similarly, their Trump administration is also seeking permission to fire the office of the special counsel. So, Garrett, that's basically like the whistleblower spot, one of them that you can make protected whistleblower disclosures to. I know I sent my stuff there, and they promptly told me to go and get bent because they're not really interested in that.
Yeah,
But
Ron Estes's office sent my information to them when I explicitly told them not to share my information with people like DOJ's OSC because I don't trust them. But they did it anyways. Thanks a lot.
So the Trump administration filed an appeal with the Supreme Court, hoping to get permission to fire the head of the federal agency dedicated to protecting whistleblowers. Thank you, Fox News. I don't know, maybe Nikki Parker was part of that piece. The appeal seeks to prevent Hampton Dellinger. His name's Hampton Dellinger. It's got two last names as a name, from resuming his role as the head of the Office of Special Counsel. A lower court judge previously temporarily reinstated him to his position, which Biden appointed him to. Dellinger argued that by law, he can only be dismissed from his position or for job performance problems. Okay, Garrett, since he didn't do jack squat for me, I think that's a job performance issue. Like, let's just follow the rules on that one.
Yeah, easy, simple. The rules are, this is, in a way, it's perfect government. It's perfect governance because when you look at various policies and procedures that government entities have, you could fire anybody if you looked at your own policies hard enough. So here they're just using what they already have. You got a job performance issue, so see ya. And I say good and good riddance is what I say.
And one of the mandates that was delivered on November 5th was that we kind of wanted the US government to operate a little bit more like a private company. We're electing a CEO, we're the shareholders, we want you to be good stewards of the money. Now let's talk about an actual private entity that got a similar mandate and has gotten kicked in the crotch the last few years. And I'm here for it and happy about it, particularly because the new Captain America Brave New World tanked over the weekend. And I love seeing Disney get crushed here. Maybe Disney got the message, or maybe they're just going to do the same thing about hiding people in DEI. So if the final story I want to cover down on today comes from Fox Business. Disney drops controversial Reimagine Tomorrow program as the company pares back its DEI initiatives. Are they not? I think it'll be up for debate on this one. Garrett, what you think? The Reimagine Tomorrow program was thrust into controversy in a 2022 meeting because that was the meeting where it was on Zoom and the host talked about her not at all secret gay agenda. And that got people thinking like, oh, maybe I'm not going to go and save thousands of dollars to take my family to this park where I can see, I don't know, Snow White, but she's got a beard. Additionally, Disney will no longer use DEI as a factor in its employee compensation. That's crazy that they actually did that to begin with.
Insane. I didn't even know that.
The movie, TV, and theme park powerhouse will now instead of using DEI, they're going to use, quote, talent strategy metrics, which are centered on business success.
Well, there you go.
Can we make money again now?
Oh, man. It sounds like Walt Disney would have wanted that from the start. But no, your crazy cultural Marxist insane agendas have seized the day, at least until now. Or maybe until now, who knows? I think in a large way, they'll probably just bury it a little bit and it's going to play a role for some time. I guess to look at it from a positive perspective, when you see a company like Disney even publicize this to some degree, that we're going to kind of change our metrics here. This isn't really working. Our shareholders are probably not real happy. So we're, I got a little visitor here. Come here. Ah, look at that. Say hello. Say hi. Okay, go out. She camera shy apparently, didn't want to even say hi, but uh they go out. So this is the problem when I don't lock my door, and the podcast studio is in our tiny house. But now I lost my train of thought. Oh, the cultural shift is a benefit and a positive, because these companies are starting to catch on. They, for a long time, what's that saying? Politics is downstream of culture. I think that's the same in business. They think they're on the cutting edge of what the people want and what the people are searching for. Well, they're starting to wake up to and starting to realize that they were wrong. And instead of leaning into their cowardice to begin with, like 15 years ago, when a lot of this madness was just a seedling, if they would have cut it off then maybe they wouldn't be in some of the dire straits they see today.
I think it's wholly appropriate that we got a news story that Disney is going to, I don't know, pivot away from the diversity, equity, inclusion, and then a little child comes in and waves hi. I think that that's probably something that they're considering, and I don't know. Time will tell if maybe that they've ultimately made the decision, or if they've just buried it for a time. When there is a Pharaoh who knows not Joseph back at the helm of things, who is bringing back the cultural Marxism that we've been living under and experiencing the last few years. Before we get Garrett's thoughts, I'll give him a chance to collect them. I want to throw a shout out to, we had a Rumble rant come in from Peaches62, just because she likes the American Radicals podcast. Thank you very much, Peaches. And we are glad that you still have your husband's credit card.
Peaches, 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 peaches. We just watched the Mario movie again last night. I just love when Bowser sings that song. Have you ever seen it or no?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. We've seen that one. And I always think of the Ice Age one because they do the same thing there. All right, Garrett, final thoughts. And then I'm looking forward to today's palate cleanse because it involves Wisconsin and I can't help it because it's February. It's beautiful out here in Florida and I've got to throw it in your face.
Yeah. We're going to go to 2 Peter chapter 2 today, and brace yourselves. I'm going to read the whole chapter because I was like, which do I could just read the first couple of verses, but I think in light of our Episcopalian bishop and her ilk and their group that we talked about a little bit, these problems have been pervasive in the church from the beginning. I mean, this is Peter's writing about the early church, and there's a number of places we could turn to that discuss similar problems. And I'm just going to kick it off in verse 1. But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master, that's Jesus, who bought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their sensuality, and because of them, the way of truth will be blasphemed. And in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. Bold and willful, they do not tremble as they blaspheme the glorious ones, whereas angels, though greater in might and power, do not pronounce a blasphemous judgment against them before the Lord. But these, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, blaspheming about matters of which they are ignorant, will also be destroyed in their destruction, suffering wrong as the wage for their wrongdoing. They count it pleasure to revel in the daytime. They are blots and blemishes, reveling in their deceptions while they feast with you. They have eyes full of adultery, insatiable for sin. They entice unsteady souls. They have hearts trained in greed, accursed children. Forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing, but was rebuked for his own transgression. A speechless donkey spoke with human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. These are waterless springs and mists driven by a storm. For them, the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved. For speaking loud boasts of folly, they entice by sensual passions of the flesh those who are barely escaping from those who live in error. They promise them freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. For if, after they have escaped the defilements of the world through the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome, the last state has become worse for them than the first. For it would have been better for them never to have known the way of righteousness than after knowing it to turn back from the holy commandment delivered to them. What the true proverb says has happened to them. The dog returns to its own vomit, and the sow, after washing herself, returns to wallow in the mire. This is the state of the church today, by and large. I know not all, but by and large, it is a state of apostasy and heresy. And we have to be aware of it. This is why we have to read God's word, is because we need to be able to pick it out and discern it instantly when we see these lies. Because what did you say, Steve? 11,000 quote unquote Christians signed on to this group. It's blasphemous. It's heretical. And we have to call it out when we see it. And we have to call it out as wrong. But I know that was a bit longer, and I'm sure there's a lot to digest there. But I didn't see any other way around it today.
I think it fits, especially when we talk about Samuel Worcester and the 11,000 quote unquote Christians. I think that contrast there, and then also with I'm going to call her Pastor Butt Buddy because it fits with her worldview. And then let's talk about contrasting worldviews here for the final palate cleanse. And this is when a Wisconsin guy meets a California girl.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Oh, Shanti. Hey, yeah.
Laura?
It's actually Laura.
Laura, smells like church in here.
Yeah, I'm just burning some sage. I do it after each passenger.
Cool.
Just kind of cleanses the negative energy. It smells good, right?
Real good. Cool.
Yeah, thank you. Namaste. Welcome to California. Where are you from?
Wisconsin.
So sorry. How are the vibes on your flight?
You know, I actually didn't meet the vibes, but I did talk to the Walensky's. Tragic. They just lost a stud bull.
Come again?
Not anymore. Once they're dead, they can't do that.
What's your sign?
Street sign?
Wait, don't tell me. You are giving Taurus vibes.
Oh, no. Chevy. S10. 4 on the floor. They don't make them like they used to.
Hey, do you want a ginger shot?
I don't know how to say no, so yes. Thank you.
So good for your immune system. Do you like turmeric?
Tumor who? That burns like Fleischmann's.
Did you know that I'm slightly psychic?
You know, you really shouldn't be so hard on yourself.
I can just sense that your third eye chakra's very open.
Jesus. I am so embarrassed right now. I was using the John before I got in here.
Garrett, I would ask you if that video was a little insulting, but since you're in Wisconsin, you can't say no. It's not really fair. So
not at all.
Thoughts and prayers for the stud bull.
It's not insulting at all. Charlie Barron's is a national treasure. Well, he's a state treasure at least, but should be a national treasure because he nails it.
All right. That's going to do it for us today, guys. The American Radicals podcast. We'll be back with you on Thursday at 10:30. If you haven't already, do smash the thumbs up, follow the channel. And until Thursday, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.